Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Eden Road podcast, where on today's show, we're going to be going over two games, Chelsea last Sunday and Newcastle last night. We're recording this Thursday morning. Boys, it's not going to be a cheerful one. Craig, how are we?
Feel like we've crashed back down to earth after the Newcastle home game, I'll tell you that.
Dan, how you feeling?
I'll be all right for the first part of the podcast, and then the second half of the podcast, terrible.
Yeah, I think so. I will keep the Chelsea section relatively brief, considering that was on Sunday. And we'll also look ahead to Forest as well. Just before we get going, remember to drop a comment down below with your thoughts of the last two games. How are you feeling ahead of the Forest game on Saturday? Drop us a follow on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. And if you haven't already, go watch my Damsgaard video. The link for that will be in the description. Have you two watched it? I'm hoping that you two have watched the video. Yep. What did we think? Tell our listeners why they should watch it.
I think you've jinxed him because ever since then, he's barely playing.
I know. And I knew that would happen, to be honest, because he didn't play against.
What you've done is perfectly outlined everything in which we keep saying about Mikael Damsgaard every week on the podcast.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, thanks, Craig. Yeah, so go and watch that. I didn't even realize because I'd left last night before I saw the third goal, before I saw our goal, and Damsgaard had a hand in that, and it tied in really nicely with some of the aspects of his games that I analysed in that video. So do go and check that out. The link for that video will be in the description. We'll start off with Chelsea. Dan, I'll come to you and we'll keep it relatively brief. How was it?
I thought it was okay. I mean, I don't mind losing games if we turn up and we give a good shift. And I think it reminded me a little bit on how we used to set up against Big Six teams in the past, which we haven't done this season. I feel like this season we tried to go toe-to-toe a bit more, and obviously that hasn't worked either. I thought we were quite solid. If you have to criticize anything, particularly in the first half, we didn't create enough at all. But at one stage, I thought this isn't a very good game, and that's probably quite a good thing because Chelsea weren't creating loads. Of course, they got the goal just before half time, and Cucurella is probably the worst person that could score it, to be honest, because he's so annoying. But second half, from about an hour onwards, I thought we were the better team. And when Carvalho hit the bar, that chance was the one. And the game could have been totally different if that had gone in. I know Jackson missed one that he probably should have scored early in the second half as well. But if Carvalho's one had gone in, then, you could see us even potentially winning that game. But then I think the second goal, the Jackson goal, was a bit of a sucker punch. And although we gave ourselves a little bit of hope at the end for the 7 minutes added time, it was just a bit too little too late. But yeah, I think last 30 or so minutes, I thought we were pretty good. We were creating chances. Norgard had one as well, which was tipped over by Sanchez. So I thought we looked quite good. And I think on another day, we would have got something out of that. And I think if we had played Chelsea of previous seasons, I think we would have got another result again. But you can see how they've moved on. Jackson especially, he wouldn't be finishing that in previous seasons.
Yeah, I think we could talk a little bit about the Jackson goal because it kind of reminded me of the Villa goal, and we're leaving strikers of the ilk of someone like Nicholas Jackson or Ollie Watkins in a 1v1 situation with Ethan Pinnett. But obviously there's a bit of nuance to that because we were 1-0 down and chasing the game. But Craig, it is kind of, I don't want to, maybe it is the story of us away against Big Six teams this season mostly has been on another day we could have got something. I'm thinking about sort of Tottenham, Man City, United. It kind of adds to the allure of the home fixtures when we play them at home, I guess, in a weird way, because we've got such great home form. But again, Thomas Frank, I know that he wants more away fans to go to games, but I mean, with some of the performances that we've had, particularly last night, and we're gonna get onto Newcastle. I'm thinking Fulham as well, and also like every other single away game, bar Everton, where we got a point with 10 men. It's not been particularly inspiring, I would say. But I don't know, am I being too harsh because of the caliber of opposition we've faced away from home in the first kind of 7-8 games?
It is a difficult one when you talk about the teams that we've played in the first 7 or 8 games. I mean, let's not beat around the bush here. I think we've had 8 away games, and of those 8, we've obviously had Liverpool, City, Spurs, United, Chelsea, Villa.
Yeah,
and then you've got Everton and Fulham. And at the start of the season, when we said at the start of the season about the run of fixtures that we've got at home versus away and how the home fixtures are going to be so important to us to put points on the board, I didn't then expect us to win 7 out of 8 home games and pick up 1 point away from home. When we spoke about it pre-season, I didn't mean that literally. And if Thomas Frank watches this, I didn't mean literally focus on the home points because it's boring away from home at the moment. It's dull. And it reminds me of the season when we had that stupid brown and orange kit. And I think we went the whole season winning like 2 away games. Rotherham was one of them and Middlesbrough was the other. But if we get to the Southampton game on January 4th, I know they were our second home game of the season, but we'll do what we did in a repeat of that season where our first home win was against Rotherham and our first away win was against Rotherham in the new year. We could have our second home win against Southampton and our first away win against Southampton if we actually win there, by the way, because they're going to have a new manager as well. It's just dull. It's boring. You want people to go to it, but there's no pull, is there? Like, what I want to spend 30 quid on a ticket, plus then I've got to drive 5 hours to get to Newcastle because there's no trains back on a Wednesday night, and I'm not sitting on a coach for 14 hours of my life. Like, there's no pull. There's nothing about that says to me this is going to be fun.
Well,
this is going to be fun.
The thing is, you say all this, and you know for a fact that you will be back at most away games this season. I was just saying, I was saying last night, I was like, I let Brentford ruin my week far too often, and for someone who does predominantly away games, I'm letting it happen basically most weeks this year or this season at least. And the sad thing is that I will go back to the next away game and I will think that we'll win, and then we'll get the same fucking result, and we'll go home and we'll get anyway. Dan, who played well against Chelsea, and then we'll talk about Newcastle because I'm getting angrier as time goes on. So we probably need to move it on to a game where we were actually shit.
Yeah, I thought it was more of a collective performance. I think it was different to the other away games we've had this season where we've had maybe good starts. I'm thinking of like Tottenham where we had a good start, but then we just had nothing in defence. We were far too easy to play through, and you have all these one-on-ones going on. And I know we kind of had a one-on-one for Jackson's goal, but I thought we were a stronger collective unit against Chelsea. And you could see the difference in how Thomas Frank set us up. And I think Thiago would have been really helpful in that game because Thomas Frank and Brentford were going a bit longer. We weren't persisting with trying to play out from the back all the time. So I think it was a strong team performance. I don't think there was a single player that particularly stood out, but I thought we did look like I can see if we can play that way down the line against perhaps some of the other good teams in the league, then I can see us getting results. Like if we go to Brighton and play something similar like that, I can see us getting a result based on how they're currently doing. So it was progress, I think, on a lot of these other away games where we've just not really been in the game. We've just been far too easy to play against and far too easy to attack.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move it on to Newcastle then. Tweet of the week this week has come from us, the Eating My Podcast account, because I was a bit hesitant to actually post this. I'll get this up on screen now so that people watching on YouTube are able to see. But it was kind of one where I left the ground. I was annoyed, obviously, but more annoyed at the fact that there wasn't anything in that game to shout about, really, because I left the game before we fucking scored as well, which is another thing. But this is what I said. No essay from us tonight. That was embarrassing from start to finish. Everyone in that away end would have paid good money to watch that. Utter garbage. That one's on you, Thomas. Am I being harsh there, chaps? Because there's a couple of people who have said, it's not Thomas's fault. We've not had a fit fullback. Can only select who he has available whilst managing a small squad. Was I being harsh to either of you?
No, I think Thomas Frank has clearly made a decision. He's not going to say it in public. He's not going to say it in his press conferences, but he's made a decision to prioritize other league games, despite us being in mid-table, whereas mid-table as you could possibly be, we're probably not going to go down. It's very, very unlikely at this stage. And if we were to put out first teamers out tonight, that's not really going to make our chances of going down much higher. I think we had to be prioritizing this one. I know it's only 5 changes, but if you look at the single 5 changes he made, it is the core of our team. It is Norgard. We are not the same without Norgard. Brian Mbumo plays every single game. He's undroppable. Nathan Collins, again, has started every single game. Undroppable. Damsgaard, he hasn't been playing as much recently, but I think we all agree that he's been our best player this season. So I know Nathan Collins ended up starting, but obviously he wasn't meant to be starting. I just don't understand how we are not trying to prioritize this. If Thomas Frank has ambitions of potentially winning something with Brentford, a Wembley final would be something that none of us have ever dreamed of. There is a chance, if we had won last night, there is a chance in a 2-legged game that we could get a good result of the G-Tech and see what happens. But we are not even going for it. And that is a frustration, because then you think about, what is the ambition then? Where are we going this season? Because yes, there's an outside chance of Europe. You also get Europe if you win the cup. You get into the Europa League, actually, which is probably the higher level of Europe than we'd get to in the league. And it is just very, very frustrating. There's few things that make me more angry than not taking the cup seriously, especially because we knew Newcastle would, because Eddie Howe always does at Newcastle. And you cannot expect, without our very best team, to get anything out of that game, because Newcastle are a very good side, particularly at home. And it was going to be a difficult game anyway.
I think what frustrates me even more, Craig, is that we had the blueprint of how to beat them. We'd beaten them at home 4-2 comprehensively in the second half a week ago. And that like, if you're going to, and granted our away form has not been anywhere near as good as our home form, but if you're going to go into a game with a mindset that you're going to win it, I don't understand the changes. What were your thoughts when you saw the lineup, Craig? Because I was thinking about just going home as soon as I saw it. Probably should have.
For those, I'll be honest. I'll say I didn't go. Thank the Lord, I did not go. And I posted a tweet, and I know that you saw it, Mike, and I know that you liked it as well. Is I didn't even pay any money to watch this game, and I still want money back for it. It was so bad. When I saw the team come out, I don't know why he's gone back to a back 5 for this game. I don't know why he's gone to a back 5 for this game. Like you said, if there's a team that you want to play now, after you've just beaten them comprehensively, is Newcastle. Yes, you're right. Our away form is pony, and it is. But I'm starting to think it's not the away form; it's the away performances. Because, yeah, all right, Chelsea might be a little bit different, but we went to Fulham, and it was awful. Like we was winning until the 92nd minute, and even in the 92nd minute, I didn't think we was going to win that game. It was so bad. But the team that he's put out, I mean, I posted something else as well. When Brentford posted up their half-time bit, and it was a picture of Fabio Carvalho, I tweeted saying, if this photo didn't exist, I'd believe you if you told me Fabio Carvalho didn't touch the ball in the first half. I would have believed you. We did nothing. We offered nothing. We didn't. I think it's the second game in a row that we haven't had a shot on target in the first half. Like, what? I don't get it. I'm just so lost for words. I'm dumbfounded. Do you know what I mean? It's rubbish. It's rubbish. But we're going to go to this weekend at home, and we're going to do the pod review. Like, we're going to do the review next week, and we're all going to be fucking laughing and happy again. But I just don't get how bad we are away from home. And it does start with the teams that we're putting out. And if you're not going to take a competition seriously, like Dan said, I think that clubs should be made to tell fans when they're putting out a weaker team, so that the fans can make a decision on whether or not they actually want to go. Because if you'd have seen that team a week ago, so many people would have gone, I don't know if I can really be bothered for that.
Well, the thing that baffled me the most was probably Norgard, considering probably our best player against Newcastle, if not one of them, and then again from watching the Chelsea game. He was really good again there. Considering the similarities between Villa and Newcastle in the way that they like to dominate midfield and break fast, and the similarities in their game and how easy it was that we were cut open by Villa a couple of weeks ago. The Norgard one, especially because in his post-match, I don't know if you guys watched it, but he said in his post-match that he rested him. He was resting him for Saturday. So it's not like he was injured, we have to assume. And I know Norgard's injury prone, but it's just like the thing I've seen a lot of people say we're prioritizing the league, but yes, there is an off chance we could get Europe, but it's not. I don't think that should be to the detriment of a competition that we were only 2 games away from being in a final of. It was just madness. Dan, I was saying before we started recording that the benefit of being in the away end at St James's Park is that you can see the pitch so well, so you can just you can see all the patterns, you can see how plays moving, the goals take an eternity to go in. Like Tonali's goal, as soon as it left his boot, you could tell it was going in, but it took like 10 seconds to hit the back of the net. But just the ease and the just how easy it was for Newcastle to carve through our midfield was not surprising. It really wasn't surprising, because we saw the exact same thing happen against Villa when we had a midfield of Yarmolenko and Yano. And I don't want to go too heavy on Yarmolenko because I actually thought he was one of our better players last night. But we saw it happen against Villa, and I don't know why Thomas Frank expected it to be different against Newcastle when we had the blueprint to beat them. And we showed and we did that a couple of weeks ago. It was baffling, Dan. Really baffling. Yeah. And go on.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was much of a benefit to have a good view at St James's Park this time around.
No, it wasn't.
But yeah, we knew what was going to happen, and I think Thomas Frank knew what was going to happen, which is why we kind of set up to come in a low block. Thomas Frank was not confident enough with the 11 that he put out to try and go at them the same way that we did 11 days before. And I think that says a lot. And it's not necessarily a criticism to any of the players that came in. None of them are bad players. But if you take out the core of the team, he's not even just taken out some players who maybe can quite easily be swapped out. He has taken out our very best players. And if you take out your 3 or 4 best players, anyone would fancy themselves. If Newcastle took out their 3 or 4 best players, if you didn't have Isak and you didn't have Joelinton, you didn't have Bruno, and you didn't have, I don't know, Gordon, then you'd fancy yourself a lot more against them. And that is the concern. We came to set up in a low block. I don't criticize Thomas Frank either for needing to rest players at some point. I understand that our schedule in particular, playing on Sunday night and then Wednesday night and then Saturday, is not ideal. I think it's the worst. I think us and Crystal Palace are the worst of all the last 8 Carabao Cup teams. But I think he got the prioritization wrong. I would have accepted it if Brian and Mbeumo started on the bench at Stamford Bridge with one eye on this game, because in all likelihood, we were always probably going to lose at Stamford Bridge this time round. And where we are in the league, if we are not going to be fully going for this competition now, then there is no scenario where we'll be fully going for this competition, because the games are always in midweek. And we're literally bang in the middle of the Premier League. You couldn't be any more stable. Yet we have chosen to prioritize the games around it and not this game, which is a great shame. And I think he has misjudged what it means to the fans, what the fans really want. There might be some people out there who prefer the league and want us to really focus on the league. But from my point of view, at the very least, I would have much preferred us to go really far in this competition, see what we can do, and then just kind of maintain our position in the league.
Yeah, for sure. I think, if we did end up getting Europe, then that's brilliant in its own right. But I just think there's definitely been a misjudgment somewhere of the impact and the effect of this competition on our chances in the league, because considering our form, considering where we are in the table, you're right, we're bang mid-table. Like we couldn't get any more mid-table if we tried, having won most of our home games and lost all of our away games. But we've kind of talked about the lineups, what the lineups mean in terms of our progression in the competition, and how it kind of looks bigger picture in terms of the league position as well. In terms of the game itself, it was no surprise that when we made substitutions, we actually looked the better team. I thought when Damsgaard was on the pitch and when Mbeumo was on the pitch and we had a little bit more potency going forward, we looked a lot better. Consolation goal at the end, 3 more injuries to chat about if we want to do that. Ethan Pinnock off in the first half, Sepp Vandenberg injured in the warm-up, and Thiago, who wasn't in the squad, after Thomas Frank said that he'd been training on the grass, or he's on the grass, or something like that. On the grass thing. What is on the grass? Someone needs to tell me what on the grass is.
He's got a garden in his house.
Yeah. But yeah, 3 more injuries to chat about, Craig. Ethan Pinnock's went down in the first half and he's out. Sepp Vandenberg, I think, was a groin injury in the warm-up. What are your thoughts on those 3? And obviously Thiago as well, because he was a big miss. And actually a really big miss that we didn't have Thiago, because I felt like with Wissa and Bumo and Carvalho, who we're going to touch on as well, Carvalho, but that kind of front 3 against a big physical defence has been tough at times throughout the season. It was particularly tough last night. And I feel like that was negated a lot by Thiago at home last week against them. But yeah, those 3 injuries, Craig, thoughts?
It petrifies me, because it means that Roslev's going to start this weekend.
Ben Mee?
No, I don't think there's a way in which. I think Chrisaya starts at centre back, which is strange, isn't it? Because he is a centre back. Yeah, I don't think of him as a centre back for Brentford. I think of him as a right back, who's always fucking injured like everyone else is. So, I mean, we've played Magoma in a few games now. Play Magoma at left back. Play Magoma at left back, and then it brings the defense back together a little bit, because Keane can go a bit further up as well. As fantastic as Keane has been, let him go a bit further up the pitch. Let him have a bit more of an attacking role in this game. Start Magoma, and then if Sepp and Pinnock can't play this weekend, it's going to have to be. I don't see a way in which Ben Mee starts. In my head, I don't see a way in which Ben Mee starts. It means it'd be Nathan Collins, Chris Ayer, and Mads Rosler at right back, and it kills me. And my dad's been on the pod before. People know who my dad is. They'll know he's a positive guy. He tries to pick on the good things in a game. We was watching the Newcastle game yesterday, and he said, "I've made a point as to watch Mads Roslev today." I was like, right. He said, "I don't think I've seen him pass the ball forwards." He said as soon as he gets on the ball, he'll run forward a little bit and he'll just turn around and pass the ball back the other way. And I say it every week that he plays. Every time that he plays, he doesn't have a forward-thinking bone in his body. He's so negative. He's so negative. And it kills me, because he's going to have to play this weekend at right back, because in my head, I don't see a way, if Sepp and Pinnock are injured, that Ben Mee starts, which means it's Nathan Collins and Chris Ayer, and then him at right back. Or just put Keane at right back. Put Keane at right back, Magoma at left back, and get Mads Roslev far away from the team at the moment.
There was a moment in the second half where Roslev, it looked like he was through on goal, or at least like he'd broken past the Newcastle's line of defence, and he had a bit of space between the man that was chasing him. It was a nice bit of play down Newcastle's left, right, and he got through, and then he just turned around and stopped, and it was just. I was just like, why? You've got you keep going, hit the byline, but he just stopped and turned around, and you hear the you hear the groans from the away end, and they just get bigger and bigger. Like
he gets vertigo. As soon as he goes past the halfway line, he shits himself. He don't know what he's doing that far up the pitch. He has to go backwards. He doesn't.
Even if it means beating the defender again the other way, he's got to get back.
Yeah. He gets past the defender, goes, sod this, runs back past the defender, and then he goes that way again.
We'll talk about Ben Mee, because I want to do like a how we'd line up, and I'll bring that up on screen for the people that are watching on YouTube. So we'll talk about Ben Mee when we do that. But Dan, me and you and I have been campaigning for Fab to start more games. But I want to caveat that with, I think we both said that Newcastle away wasn't the one to do it, considering that, what we've talked about already in this episode, the physicality of their midfield with Tonali and Joelinton and Guimaraes. He's not really that kind of player, and against players like Burn, they're a big physical team basically. So I didn't fancy him to start in this game, but it wasn't his best, nor was it Janelt's best. I've singled out a few players that haven't had good games, but I feel it all just kind of comes back to Norgard. if Norgard's not in the team, Janelt doesn't look as good. If Norgard's not in the team, Fabio doesn't look like Fabio. I thought was really good against Newcastle last week, but he didn't. No, he didn't do it for me last night, Dan.
I always compare him to Damsgaard because he's in that same role, and then I always feel like he can do more. But part of me feels bad for saying that because I think Damsgaard is so good this season, and he does things that no one else can. Even against Newcastle, I thought for the first time against Newcastle, I thought Carvalho got into good positions, running forward, had options right and left. But
Yeah.
Damsgaard, I think, would pick the perfect ball out and create a real chance out of that. And I don't think he's quite got that last bit yet. So, yeah, I do think he should have been playing more, but not necessarily at the expense of Damsgaard. I think you've got to find even maybe sometimes a role for both of them in the team. Or if Damsgaard ever isn't playing or comes off, then it's the time you bring him on. But yeah, I think we can see more from him. I think there are signs and there is more to come from him. So I wouldn't write him off. I think we've seen, especially with this season with Collins and Lewis Potter and Damsgaard, how how players can come on after a little while. And it wasn't down to him, this performance. This performance was a bad performance across the board. And I do agree about Norgard. I think it's just a sense of calmness when he's in the team. I think he makes everyone else better around him. I don't think we've truly recognised that until this season. Sorry. I think Janelt actually is much better as the guy next to Norgard, not doing Norgard's job. And I think when you're having someone like Yarmoliak in there as well, I think he benefits so much more from having the guidance of Norgard. And even obviously a few weeks ago, there was some discussion of whether Norgard should still be captain. And I think he is a good captain. I think just because he's not in the referee's face and you don't hear him all the time, I think the players do really respect him. And I think they do follow his lead, and he does lead them because we see what it's like without him in the side. And it is just a completely different team, and we're far too easy to play against. And that's a difference. I think we actually controlled the midfield all right when we played them 11 days ago. And that's a big compliment against their three midfielders who are very, very strong. And it was just non-existent this time, unfortunately.
You mentioned Yarmoliak there, Craig, and I actually think last night there's signs. I think against Villa when he was a bit more isolated, and it was kind of the same story last night, but he was more confident. You could tell when he was on the ball, he was trying things, he was mopping things up, and he did make their central midfielders look a little bit silly sometimes. He's got a little feint in him that kind of sends him the wrong way and allows him to have a bit of space. He and KLP were the only two last night for me that played well and could leave the pitch saying that they played well. KLP in particular, especially in that first half, he's just doing such a shift. But we've kind of spoken about KLP quite a lot on this podcast this season. But Yarmo, another one for the future, probably, I think, in terms of him and Carvalho sort of going forward. He's starting to come good. I'd actually say last night he was our better player. He was our best player on the pitch. And I like just his style is quite different to what we've had before in midfield. I think with someone like Norgard and Janelt, we kind of know the way they play, but Yarmo is a little bit different. He's a little bit more technical, a little bit more like a Jensen type player. But the only thing I'd level at him, Craig, is that he doesn't look forward enough, which, we've spoken about on this pod already in terms of players that don't look forward enough. And the biggest compliment that you can pay Damsgaard is that he's always fucking looking forward. He always wants to get the ball forward whenever he does anything. But yeah, Yarmo, another good performance, I'd say, from him, Craig.
Can't hear you, Craig, mate.
You're muted, mate.
Sorry, chuck myself on you, as I did. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yarmo was the one that had the ball in our corner for our goal. Had the ball in the corner, did a couple of drop shoulders, got it out, and it was Damsgaard, or it was knocked down to Damsgaard in the middle, who beats two players and puts the ball out to Brian, wasn't it? I think it was Yarmo in the corner that actually had the ball, unless he'd gone off at that point, and I'm just talking waffle, which is also possible, by the way. But he's been really consistent over the last few games. He's been really consistent, and he's earning his place, which is really good for him, because when Jensen eventually comes back, another injury which we haven't really spoken about, when Jensen comes back, he's going to have to earn his place, and Yarmo is going to push him for that place. Damsgaard, one of the ones that we want to see consistently week in, week out. He's been our best player of the season. Norgard is going to come in. If we're playing with three midfielders in which we do frequently, that third midfield place is up for grabs from a lot of people now, from a lot of depth, which is strange as well, considering we're talking about injuries. But when Jensen's fit, we're going to have Norgard, we're going to have Damsgaard. Is it Fab? Is it Yarmo? Is it Janel? Is it Matty Jensen? Like, who's that third midfield player? And at the moment, in my head, with the way that he's been playing recently, is Yarmo. It's him that makes that third. He's the third midfielder with Norgard and Damsgaard. He's been really good, and rightly so. He got the praise, didn't he, after the Newcastle game at home in the video from the changing room where Thomas Frank singles him out and shouts him out. And long may it continue. Yeah, I mean, we've got a few younger players, didn't we? That's kind of what we focused on in the summer as well. Nagoma coming in, young player. Magoma, obviously now in and around the first team as well. Gustavo Nunes disappeared off the face of the earth as well. So, yeah. But yeah, no, we're building ourselves a solid foundation moving forwards, and he is showing his worth now. So I'm very happy for him.
Yeah, those are the only two positives I think we could take from the Newcastle game, in terms of Yarmo being good and KLP being good, and obviously the subs making a difference at the end. Concluding thoughts on the last two aways, Dan? Chelsea and Newcastle.
I can handle Chelsea. I don't mind Chelsea. I think they're two completely different games. I'm just very disappointed in how we've approached this, and that comes from the very top, unfortunately. And it's not very often we criticise Thomas Frank. I love Thomas Frank, but I just think we've got to have ambition, and we've got to, when we're in this position, we've got to go for it, because this is the prize. And, you know, we've not been there before. You know, imagine how well this squad would be regarded if we did really do something in the cup, and we've almost not even tried with the lineup. We've not given it our full efforts with the lineup. And when you have that feeling that a game is lost before it's even began, you know something's wrong, and that's the big shame and the big disappointment.
Yeah, lucidly summed up. Thank you, Dan. Let's move on. Let's move on to Forest. How are we feeling, Craig? Ahead of that, we're back at home, back at the G-Tech, back at the 3-Tech, if you know what I mean. That was terrible. Sorry.
Let's move on. Let's move on quickly from that one, Mike.
How are you feeling, Craig? Ahead of it.
If it wasn't, I don't like this game, to be honest. As a sport, I don't like it at the moment because it's so up and down, and I just dislike it. If I had to pick a team that I didn't want us to lose at home to, and I didn't want us to throw away this losing streak that we've got at home to, Bartholomew, it would be them. Because if they beat us, they are going to be insufferable. They're already insufferable, and I couldn't think of a worse team to do that. But we know we're going to set up differently. We know we're going to attack the game differently, and we know that we're going to create the chances. I mean, yeah, they're doing remarkably well this season. Let's not ignore that. They're doing remarkably well this season. I think they're in the Champions League places at the moment, but that is also down to other teams maybe not doing so fantastically. You know, Newcastle, Man City, Villa, Spurs, United, not all not doing fantastically, and they've capitalised and taking their chance at the moment. But we're at home, you know.
We're at home.
We're at home, so anything can happen.
Dan, what have you watched much of Forest this season? I've been kind of waiting for them to drop off, and they just annoyingly haven't. How have you seen Forest this season?
They are good. They are good. Chris Wood's on fire up front. He can score all type of goals. He'll be a threat in the air, and if we give him space in the box, he will probably score. I think they've got a very solid defence with Murillo and Milenkovic. I think they've been really, really good for them. So they will probably be the hardest team to break down the GTEP this season. Given we're used to scoring 3 or 4 goals a game when we play at home, it will be a really good test to see who comes up on top in that regard. And then they do have creators in and behind Wood as well. It's quite a well-balanced, complete team, really. And they've spent enough money, I guess, since promotion to put that together. So I'm a little bit concerned. I'm a little bit concerned about our lack of defenders potentially as well. And I expect a good performance from us because we have chosen off our own accord to rest a lot of these players in midweek in order to be ready for this one. So I expect a good performance, but I think it will be our hardest game so far. I don't think you can deny that. I think Newcastle are a good team as well, but they were very up and down, especially around the time we played them the first time. Whereas Forest have been largely consistent since the beginning, and they've got to be seen as quite a strong team now. And I also think they're better away. I think their away record is better than the home record, which again is something quite interesting.
I think our home record is slightly better than our away record as well at the moment, so it will be all right.
I didn't actually think of the fact that if it was Forest to beat us at home, they would be fucking insufferable on Twitter. They would literally not. They would be awful. I'd not thought about that. So thanks for enlightening me, Craig. I've got I've got the lineup in front of us, boys. For the people that was watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. Flecken in goal, obviously. Are we going KLP at left back? That's who we'd want there, or are we wanting maybe Magoma to come in?
I'm going KLP. I don't think Magoma's ready to be. I wouldn't chuck him in, not in a tough game like this.
I actually, and we'll speak about Ben Mee because we said we were going to do it. I actually thought Ben Mee wasn't that bad last night. And I wouldn't be too hesitant to put him in next to Collins and have Aya pushed out to right back. Is that something that we think will happen, or do we see Aya coming in at centre half and Mads being at right back?
I think this is a tough one.
Wait, are we doing our preferred lineup, or are we doing the realistic lineup? This is how we'd like to line up. I would prefer to have Aya on the right as the right back, and then me and Collins in at centre half. Any complaints there?
I think it's really difficult to call this one because there is every chance. I mean, Chris Wood isn't the quickest, so maybe you could go with Ben Mee for this one, but you are just a bit worried that he could be exposed in terms of pace. And I'm not sure he was the best on the ball against Newcastle either. I think they pressed us really well, but I think at times Ben Mee was a bit quick to just launch it forward and it came straight back at us. But I don't know. Ideally, you don't want either of them. Either Ben Mee or us there in the team. I would maybe just go with Ben Mee purely because,
Go on.
I was just going to say purely because they don't have someone like Isak up front who is a lot quicker. Because I would be more reluctant to go with Ben Mee then.
Yeah, Craig, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that logic makes sense, and I think I'd rather have Chris Aya against someone like Hudson-Odoi than Roslev. Yeah. I think I'd rather have Aya against Hudson-Odoi, and I've forgotten who's on the other side. Anyway, Elanga.
Yeah, one of them normally play that front three, or gives that kind of front four. Chris Wood, gives White, Elanga, and Hudson-Odoi. That's a scary front four, especially if they kind of, the way Forest play this season, they kind of soak up a lot of the ball and play on the counter. But it's going to be difficult either way. What about the midfield three? We're hoping that obviously Christian Norgard is going to come back in, considering he was rested last night.
I think it'll be Norgard, Janelt, Damsgaard.
Yeah, if Damsgaard doesn't start, I'm baffled, because like, is he then just being dropped because Thomas Frank's not happy with his form, considering even though he's been our best player this season?
I think, given this is a tough game, I think there's an argument to have Damsgaard kind of on the left, but in that role where he drifted in, where he can drift in, and put Yarmo in the middle as well, and just have that extra body in the middle, and KLP can bomb up and down the left, and Damsgaard can kind of start on the left but drift in.
Yeah, that's not a bad shout. Well, let's fill these in first. Craig, I'll come to you. What do you think? Do you think we'd rather have another body in midfield and then Damsgaard can kind of float out in this left position, but also come in centrally?
Well, the thing is, it did work when he did that. Was that against Leicester that he did that more against? Because it wasn't the Newcastle game, was it? Because we had Thiago.
It was.
No, yeah.
It was. Was it Leicester? Yeah, it was, because it was Sharda.
Sharda got a hat trick in that game.
Who did that happen against? Because it wasn't.
It was one of the home games before that.
It was one of the home games, but it wasn't Newcastle or it wasn't Leicester then. Those are the last two ones that I can think of. Nah, man, just go for it. Fuck it. You know what I mean?
I think I agree with you, Craig. I do just think let's just actually just go for it and just just try and outscore them, because if we go for an attacking lineup, we know that our defense is going to be playing. But if we've got a front four of Wissa and Bumo, Sharda and Damsgaard, that's going to hurt any team in the league. So I think there we have it. KO from right to left for those listening on Spotify. Obviously, Mark Flecken in goal, Chris Ayer at right back, Collins and me as the centre halves, KOP on the left, Norgard and Jan out as the double pivot with Damsgaard in that 3-10 role, and then Kevin Sharda on the left, Johan Wieser up top, Brian and Bumo on the right. Anyone want to take us into Forest? Give us a little preview for the game, as Callum would normally do in a really elongated way.
Yeah, I'll do that one then. So let's be realistic. We're going to score 3. It's just whether or not we can keep them less than 3, or if they score 3, we'll score 5. Let's go for that one then, shall we? Up the bees.
Up the bees, yeah. I think that'd be a good point to round off the Ealing Road podcast. We'll be back for the full-time show after the Forest game, hopefully to analyse what is another 3 points at home. I'm going to plug the Damsgaard video again. The link for that will be in the description. There's 5 things that make him a Premier League player of the season. The link for that video, as I just said, in the description of this one. Also, drop a comment down below with your thoughts ahead of the Forest game. What did you think of the performance of Newcastle? What changes would you make to the lineup on Saturday? Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Give us a follow on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram, and we shall see you after the Forest game, chaps. It's been a pleasure as always.
Up the bees.
Up the bees.